All right, you may start.
Okay, hi, I'm Dr. Catherine Zeman, and I want to welcome everybody to the Spring 2017 Green Community Book Read, being sponsored by the Recycling Reuse Tech Transfer Center and the Iowa Recycling Association again, so this is great. And again, this spring, we're focusing on issues in technology, green business. And I, have a passion for understanding that and understanding how that is going to help us get to a sustainable future. I mean, obviously, technology and a business exchange in our complex world is, the way we support ourselves and interface with the environment. And to try and find a path through to sustainability means we're going to have to try and find a path through in this fashion. So that is always a passion of mine. I end up in a lot of conversations with people about it. And I found out about this book from one of the grad students who I think is in the audience this afternoon and involved in the book club, because the students at the Panther Initiative for Environmental Equity and Resilience are involved in it. And that is Ms. Julie Grunkley. So I have to thank her for introducing me to this book, because we had talked about all these kind of concepts. She said, hey, have you seen this book? When I found out about it, then I was talking to other people about it, and we did in the fall semester a session jointly with the School of Business and the Business Ethics Group and Dr. Van de Zand on what if we could envision abundance. And Mark, who's here with us today virtually, Mark Herman, who is a past board member of the Iowa Recycling Association and a current contractor for the Recycling Reuse Tech Transfer Center as a green business consultant and resource person, etc., working with all of our groups throughout the state and Cedar Valley, also presented with me at the session that we did in the fall, again through the business ethics program and with Dr. Van de Zand up at the Cedar Falls Public Library. So we have kind of worked together on this for a while, and we said, hey, this is such a good book, and it's such a good read, and it's so accessible to so many people. It would be great if we could get this for the Green Community Book Read in the spring. And so that's what we're doing. This is the kickoff session. We've divided the book into 3 chunks, and I'm doing the first one. We'll have the second and the third, February 9th and February 23rd. And Janu Shrestha, our doctoral student, is coordinating these sessions for us. And she'll be working with us on the 9th and the 23rd with the guest speakers then. And I guess I'll just go ahead and get started. I need to share my screen, so hopefully this will go over well. If it doesn't, somebody let me know, and you'll be able to see. I'm going to keep it on a smaller scale, but you'll be able to see the entire Prezi that I want to go through. And the way I've structured it, you'll see here, share screen. Okay, screen. Can you guys see my screen here?
Yes.
See that? Yeah, okay, great. All right, that's working really well. I think I can make it actually a little bigger too. So let me do that without making it a full, there, okay. Maybe I can in a little better. Is that even better then?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So the book, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, Peter Diamandis and Stephen Cutler, came out in hardcover in 2012, 2014 in paperback, which we're using, Simon Schuster Publisher. So, we've had it around here for maybe 5 years. And I've taken the book into chunks. And, uh-oh. Okay, well, that froze up on me for some reason. Let's see if I do this. No, I may have to go to the full screen. Okay, somebody let me know if full screen causes any problem. Okay, still good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay,
still good.
Great. All right. Okay, so what I want to do then is take 2 major sections to this book and get feedback from people. I don't want to go through each chapter and reiterate everything you've already read, but I'm going to do this in kind of 2 major chunks. the perspective chunk, chapters 1 through 4, just as it says in the table of contents, and the exponential technologies chunk in chapters 5 through 6. And to me, as I look at those chapters and I ask myself, what are some of the big questions and concepts we could all discuss together during this particular book session, I said, you know, one, under perspective, how does technology free up resources? It's a big component of what that portion of the chapters are talking about. What do we need to create abundance? And how does our thinking and pessimism impact opportunity? And then I'll do the same thing through the second chunk. In that chunk, we'll be talking about what is a quantum economy. And there's some examples of quantum economy. And how is technology moving us to a point of singularity? What is that? And why does it matter? And how could that possibly matter for abundance? So let's just go ahead and jump in there with the first big question. I'll say a couple of things about it, and then I'm going to open it up for people's reflections. So how does technology free up resources? Okay, we talks in the book, and people are familiar with the economist, philosopher, 1700s, early 1800s, Thomas Robert Malthus. Food increases linearly while population exponentially. So his concern that we were going to overpopulate the earth, overrun the earth, have massive population crashes. This has been the sort of foundation for the concept of scarcity. But you know, again, we have to ask ourselves, is this really the foundation for just a concept of scarcity, or is it really the reality that Malthus lived under? Think about the time period, the technology, and what was actually possible and available. And of course, that's what we've kind of been laboring under for quite some time. Paul Ehrlich, functioning under that philosophy, wrote The Population Bomb, right? Population bomb predicted by the year 2000, the entire ecosystem on the planet would crash due to human overpopulation. Well, that didn't really happen. And when that was missed, it kind of led to Ehrlich's famous equation that sort of explains some of this with the technology affluence issue. It's the total impact of a civilization is going to be a product of the population size of that particular civilization, the extractive technology they have, and the level of affluence they are able to live at because of that extractive technology. And that's a very clear concept at the very beginning of the book, you know, when he makes a point that that scarcity is really something that technology mediates. Okay, so what do people think about that? Anybody have any reflections on that, or ideas about that concept related to the idea of technology? Technology maybe won't create another pie for us, but it'll make more slices of pie available with less impact on what we draw those slices from. Was that any kind of revelation? Remember, if you want to say something, you have to unmute your microphone if you happen to be in the virtual audience. Okay, I'm assuming nobody has anything they want to say at the moment. Safe assumption. Okay. So then the next concept that comes to us from that first section is the idea of creating abundance by innovating technology, and the idea that we could create this abundance while at the same time decreasing our footprint, carbon or otherwise, or our resource use. And he goes to great lengths to illustrate that for us with a lot of data that's provided both on the website that they have that goes along with the book, and then in the back of the book. And it shows us how over time our technologies have become smaller, lighter, less environmentally destructive, use less energy to produce, and cost less, and provide us with more abundance. And then we have to understand his concept of abundance. And of course, this is really the whole idea of that cornucopia, and that gives rise to the idea of the Malthusians, who feel that we're going to be facing a situation of resource scarcity, versus techno-optimists who feel that we will be facing a cornucopian or abundant future. But we again have to kind of understand, does that mean that everyone is going to live in a massive skyscraper emblazoned with, you know, gold or something? Not necessarily. He says it means that we're going to have relative abundance, and that he sees this as a pyramid kind of structure where we have the support and freedom to live in an abundant environment where everyone has opportunities to interact in that environment and we're not undermine it, where individuals have access to education, communication, and adequate energy, and then where they have freedom of thought, exchange, discussion, and the freedom to develop themselves and to shift what they want to do, where they want to live, etc. And he says that, you know, as far as the environment portion of that, that would include our food and water access, and he gets very specific about that. And he says, okay, 3 to 5 liters of water per person and about 2,000 calories per day. And this would be his definition of abundance. He says it's not about providing everyone on the planet with a life of luxury, rather it's about providing all of us with a life of possibility. The possibility to move all the way up that pyramid. And then he did kind of say, hey, I'm taking this from the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, the psychologist. And if you look at the Merriam-Webster definition, that's fairly similar: ample quantity, relative degree of plentifulness. There's also affluence and wealth. So what do people think about that?
Can you hear me? I'm Margaret Whiting.
Somebody's got to be closer to a microphone. I can barely hear you there.
Right here. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Better.
Yes. Hi.
Well, hi. I'm Margaret.
Hi, Margaret.
Hi there. I'm thinking.
Hi, Margaret.
Hi there, everybody. I'm thinking of all the technologies. This book is about all the technologies, but my interest is mostly energy independence worldwide, and we are really close to a time where we can have 100% renewable energy on the planet, and the technology is here today. It's just that politics aren't here yet. But to go on with the technology, by solving the climate change crisis problem by getting 100% renewable energy soon, we solve a whole bunch of problems all at the same time. So all the healthcare problems will be better. People won't be breathing in particulate matter from coal, and they won't have mercury poisoning in the water, and we won't have as much tornadoes and floods, and malaria will be less because we've solved that problem. There'll be more water, fresh water available for people. And so that will solve the poverty problem more, because we'd have people can have solar and wind right on their little buildings and huts all over India and Africa, and they don't have to pay a bill to the big energy company. They will just have access to energy right where they are. It will be like, instead of the top down, it'll be the bottom up, and they can make their own energy. They can sell their own energy to their neighbors. And so then the economy will help be better worldwide too. So I'm just going from one technology, there's feedback loops. So this one technology of getting renewable energy on the planet will solve a whole bunch of problems all at the same time.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's an important point that he begins to make and illustrate, and we're probably going to see more of it as we go on in this book. How about somebody else? Anybody else want to add something?
This is Mark.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just go to the definition, because when Dr. Zeman, when you and I first talked about this last year, It was interesting to me because I don't think I understood really at that time, without having read the book, what that really meant. I thought, are we talking about just having so much affluence and wealth? But we really aren't. And we're really talking about basic human needs. And in many cases around the world, we know that's not being met. And with technology, I do think this definition of abundance can be achieved very easily. I mean, it's happening every day right now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. It's important to keep in mind what the idea an abundance economy, or, yeah, it means the basic human opportunity to have plentifulness. In other words, you're not starving, you have water to drink, you have secure, safe housing. And from that platform, then, you know, people can go on and move forward as far as they would like, you know. I think that that's really where he's coming from with it. So it's interesting. And anybody else have any other?
Well, I hope I'm not jumping too quickly ahead, but I was troubled by some of his definition about abundance being able to save time, and save time so that you could be educated and get a job. And in a global economy, with the emphasis on personal responsibility, individual responsibility, and it doesn't matter if things are shared inequitably, we're going to make you efficient so you can save time. And then the other thing that was troubling to me was this emphasis about the consumption rate. It didn't seem to trouble anybody. I mean, it didn't seem to trouble him when he says between 1980 and 2000, the consumption rate has grown twice as fast in the developing world than on the rest of the planet. And so while there are many things that I am happy about, like having the optimism and being sure to share technology, it sort of worries me that there's so much put on media and communication and efficiency, and we're all just real happy with consumption. That worries me some, especially when he criticizes the use of biomass fuel because that's so labor intensive, isn't it? Anyway, probably enough said to jumpstart hopefully a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much. Is that I think one of the things I noticed he mentioned at the very beginning is, in order to, you know, have everybody with the current technology we're using, okay, which is, you know, pretty much still fairly lodged within the, you know, petroleum fuel reality, the petroleum fuels. He said we would need 3 planets to live a European lifestyle and 5 planets to live a North American lifestyle. And so I definitely see that he recognizes that, but I understand your concern. It's Deb, right? Is it? It's a little hard. The camera's hard for me to see who's actually talking. Okay, so I understand, Deb, how you're bringing that point forward. You know, you worry. Well, it's good to be optimistic, but should we be a little bit balanced with the optimism? Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think it's important. We always need to question, everything that's set out for us. So I think those are legitimate questions. I mean, some ways that I can see forward with that I've read the whole book, so I kind of know he's going to go further on with that. And then, you know, he also will be talking about some of these concerns he has too, with some of the stuff he brought up. But it's at the very last part of the book, you know, it's like the last 8 or 9 pages. So yeah, it's not always right up front. You know, and I'm going to show, I have a video of additive manufacturing today. There's so many people that really are convinced we can get to near zero waste. And so it becomes an issue of if we could get to zero waste and we were completely able to recover for either energy or additional applications, the byproducts of our consumption, what technically would stop us from having as much consumption as we wanted? And I'm just throwing that out there as a, maybe to some people an even alarming idea. But literally, if we were at near to zero waste, recycling most things, had brought a large degree of biomimicry into things. And through additive manufacturing, we're really wasting very little, if anything. I mean, is it possible we could get to the point where we could consume as much as we wanted and it wouldn't matter? Is that possible? What do you think? Or is that just an impossible, absolute cornucopia delusion? I don't know.
This is Mark. I would definitely say, it's possible, but is it right? That's what we should always kind of keep in mind, I think.
Mm-hmm. Is it right? That's interesting. I like that, right? Can you explain why? I mean, if it didn't have a negative impact on the environment, how could it be wrong? And again, I'm goading the conversation. So.
Well, from my perspective, I would say that, we have to live beyond today. We have to live for future generations. We have to leave here what they need in the future, 10 generations from now. Mm-hmm. And even though we have abundance and could create abundance going forward in the next 10, 20, 30 years because of efficiencies in technology, to me, it doesn't seem necessary to just use it up because we have it. I think we have to reinvest in what we have.
But if we got to the point where the technologies were so efficient that we generated little or no waste, that we could do things with, additive manufacturing that didn't involve constantly harvesting forests, that we had sat down around the world and decided how much forests should be in reserves and set-asides, and we were completely able to do that, would it matter? Can we just consume whatever we wanted? I mean, we kind of talked before about the idea that you could, 3D print a whole new interior to your house every month, as long as you could just recycle the stuff and 3D print it. So you could literally change the furnishings inside your house every month. What would there still be a ethical reason not to do that? Again, I'm just thinking about what this might mean for the future.
Well, that certainly would be a personal preference of the individual. I myself see abundance as being able to share the resources of what we have to a point where everyone has that minimum amount, to say what is fair to consume and go beyond what is needed. I don't feel like myself I'm in my lifestyle. I have abundance. I have what I need. Do I need a lot more? Actually, I'm kind of considering I need less.
Right.
But I know what you're saying. Could we? Yeah, I think we could if we were efficient. I see it all the time in manufacturing. They become so efficient with so little waste that they actually can produce everything so much more efficiently now that their costs go down, their distribution goes up. It's all positives.
Yeah. It raises some really interesting and challenging questions for us to think about and to talk about. And I definitely understand what you're saying, Mark. I think from the perspective, and I've thought about this a lot, and I've thought, yeah, literally, why would I want so much because I need less, actually? You get to the point where you tell people, don't give me anything because I don't need anything more. I don't want to deal with another thing. Right. And it's like the overwhelm of things. I truly understand what you're saying. Now, I don't know. I know some people where, maybe that would never bother them. But it almost seems like it gets to sort of a happiness, so many things to juggle, balance kind of act, so that there would be limits, and maybe those limits are inherent to like human nature and happiness and health and well-being from a psychosocial perspective. Versus the consumption. But we're still far away from not having our footprint matter a lot and having that footprint be an issue and a problem. But for the sake of discussion, anybody have any other?
Yeah. This is Julie.
Yeah.
And I was, just going along with, the ethical, things of consumption and, but when you have when you live in, what we live in right now is scarcity. We're afraid we're not going to have enough of this, and we're afraid we're not going to have enough of that. So then we tend to hoard, and gather as much as we can. But if we have an abundance of things and we know that need is met, just as human nature, you know, from a psychological perspective, we tend to not want it anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think abundance, you know, if we get things in abundance and we come at it from an abundance perspective, you know, it's just like with food. If I know if I know I'm not gonna, you know, if I don't know where my next meal is coming from, I'm gonna eat everything I can in sight. But if
Okay, yes.
the refrigerator full, I can stop when my stomach says, you know what, I think I'm full.
I think that's an excellent point. He kind of brings that up in a way that we'll come back to in a little bit, related to people's thought processes and pessimism versus optimism, and the idea that we're still sort of living as hunters and gatherers, in the sense that what you just said. I mean, if a hunter and gatherer finds a hoard of food or honey, or, you know, I mean, you eat it all and you consume as much as you can, and maybe that's still driving a lot of our thinking.
Yeah, I think it is, because we live in this scarcity economy. You know, we're afraid that we're always afraid that we're not going to have enough. So, yeah, but once we get to that point where we finally figure out we have enough, then we're satisfied and we don't need it.
That would be a completely different thing for humanity, because even though we're living in a period of relative abundance for some people, certainly not everyone around the world, obviously, which is kind of inexcusable because we do have so much abundance even now still. But even though we're living in that period, it is still very clear that, you know, people somehow feel like they don't have abundance. I mean, anybody else have some I mean, just this previous election, there's a large group of people that feel that they're very imperiled. They're very concerned about their abundance and ability, you know, to maintain that. So.
Hello, I'm Zunu Shrestha.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about abundance, when I read about this book, I was skeptical because I didn't know like how abundance happened, because I come from a country, Nepal, which is a relatively poor country, and over there we don't have abundance of anything, like any resources, so like electricity or water. And over there we try to store more, because what happens if there's no electricity or water for tomorrow? So when I read this book, I didn't know what to think about abundance, but now after reading few chapters, I came to know that it can happen. And as Julie said, that if we have a lot of things, then we might not need that thing afterwards. I mean, like we know that it is there in the environment. So yeah, it's really nice to read this book.
Okay, very interesting. Anybody else want to say something, or
I just wondered how we bring about this mindset of abundance, given all of the psychological issues in the media that he points towards that sort of works against that tide. I mean, someone would argue that there's a political desire to fuel fear, because that allows power to do whatever they want to do, and we're really living with that, I think. So how do we get to a point where we communicate abundance is possible without people killing each other before that happens?
That's a good point. Yeah, he makes the point in the text that the neocortex portion of our brain is evolutionarily disconnected in a sense from the amygdala, right? And that the amygdala is more fundamentally tied to the basic feelings of fear and anxiety that are associated with scarcity. So anything that triggers the fear and anxiety aspect of our brain is immediately going to trigger everything related to feeling imperiled, feeling threatened, not feeling empathy, because empathy is really in that neocortex function, and not being hopeful, being pessimistic, going into defensive mode, all these types of things. As soon as I feel, you know, a lack of abundance, or I feel my abundance threatened. And it really is related to some of that, like brain development stuff, and that is a really big thing to overcome. I think literally people have to talk about it just like we're talking about it, not saying that it would be easy. And I think, you know, over time, what has happened with humanity is so very clear, is that as we've innovated technologies the technology and the environment that we then set ourselves, put ourselves in because of those technologies feeds back into who and what we are. And it has literally changed the way our brains develop. And I think it's a longer term process, and it's quite possible that process just doesn't happen overnight, but certainly we have to talk about it. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. I mean, how many of you are aware that the empathy portion of our brain is wired into the neocortex, right? And, whenever we're full of anxiety or fear, we really can't access our empathy very well. I mean, some of us who are in psychology might have known that. I mean, I'm not in psychology, but how about anybody else have any thoughts on that? How many people was that new information for when they found out about that? If there was really actual physiological disconnect, if you're feeling fear and anxiety, it's much harder for you to feel empathy. Yeah, I mean, it's new. Yeah, so there's an actual physiological barrier to overcome there. It's not so easy. You're going to have to bypass hardwiring in order to shift that behavior. I mean, it really, in a way, helps you understand the situation, like even in our country with the current election. Large numbers of people feeling like they don't have jobs, they're stressed out, they're anxious, they don't know where their food's coming from. Empathy shuts down, basic amygdala functions, defensiveness, protection, come into play. And that happens to all people because that's just human brain wiring. So interesting, okay, very interesting stuff. I'm not saying that can't be influenced for the better or the worse. I mean, we can help people calm down in those situations, or we can just fuel the fire, right? That way. So very interesting stuff. All right, well, I'm gonna go on a little further, and I think we might come back to that a little bit and have some other concepts we can engage in here. And this is kind of perfect timing that way, because the next slide, which was how does our thinking and pessimism impact opportunity? We've been talking about this a little bit. I love this image. I didn't want to pay for it, so it came from Getty Images. So you can use it for free, but to get the Getty Images thing off there, you have to pay for it. But is that a cool image or what, right? You can't see the forest for the trees or the tiger in the forest, right? And this is where it gets into that idea of talking about brain wiring and our instant inability. We go into fight or flight mode whenever the amygdala is triggered. We had a long period of time, and I kind of didn't buy this all the way from him. He said, in the past we were sure this tiger was lurking in the forest, but now in modern society we have to live with probabilities, and we just can't do that so well. Well, I'm not sure about that. I think it was always a probability that you would go out to gather food in the jungle and maybe the tiger would eat you, or maybe not. The tiger wasn't always out there lurking, right? So I'm not sure I bought that completely, but I did really appreciate the information he provided about technology, human evolution, brain evolution, and some of the things that can shut down the ability to be optimistic, the ability to envision all creative alternatives, and our tendency to rely on heuristics and stereotypes. They save energy, and I remember taking a social psychology class years ago where they talked about stereotyping and the fact that so many people kind of stereotype others because it saves energy. It literally saves brain energy. So people default to that first, just saving energy. Pessimism helps to keep prey alive. If we think that tiger's out there, we're likely going to be on the lookout for it all the time, but then we're always looking for the negative, always looking for problems. And that, he says, it's, deceptive. The negative can, and the common sense can deceive us. And it can also keep us in panic mode and not being able to think through, I see the forest for the trees. In other words, see the whole system, see the box that the box is in, and think outside of all the boxes. So what do you guys think of that? We're struggling against our own evolutionary brain wiring to shift some of these things, which is why it's hard.
Well, I agree with what your last sentence. Yeah, we're struggling against our evolutionary brain functioning.
Yeah.
And that is why it's hard.
I find for someone who is strictly optimism, incredibly constantly talking about the individual, and the individual is a member of a group, and group against group, which to me perpetuates a lot of this fighting and concern about survival and prejudice. And if he would construct a narrative of self that's more inclusive, more relational sense of self, which I think if you look anthropologically occurs in many societies. I think he's got a wrong starting point, and that we might be more easy to reach abundance, might more easily be able to be compassionate and empathetic if we didn't have this construction that tells us, well, you know, it's just really in our brain and we can't help it. You know, we're animals down to the core.
Mhm.
We need to start at a different place, I think, with a more relational sense of self, more compassionate and empathic being from the beginning. A person that realizes they're interconnected and that they can't really pull themselves and extract themselves in some individual mind that he wants to have us believe in. So I think that's troubling, borrow some of this discourse that's in psychology, and I wish he would look to a different literature.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because you're right. He doesn't draw on this idea of at least so far. And I'm down to the very last parts of that book, and I don't see a lot about community. Is that kind of where you're headed with it?
Yeah, in a sense of yourself is interconnected.
Right. I wonder if it's just the, again, personality tendencies related to, technology, and then you just see yourself as more individual, separated. I don't know. Because modern technology, would most people agree that it tends to isolate people more, even though it's supposed to connect us more? What do you think? We have the Twitter, we have the Facebook, it's all this, all these people are connected, but really are they kind of isolated?
Oh, I would agree with that totally.
Very much so.
Okay, well, yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so let's go on then to the next. Keep an eye on the time here. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing, that he kind of talks about is that the trends are with us. And I mean, he makes some good points. And again, if you think about where we're at now and where people were hundreds of years ago, the Sun King, for example, of France, you think about what he had that we don't have and what we have that he couldn't have. And you think of this idea of abundance, sometimes people do kind of forget how far we've come. But the Sun King bathed once a week. He couldn't call a relative on the phone, couldn't have orange juice for breakfast every day. I mean, there's so many improvements in our lives. So do we often, I mean, does he have a point to some extent? And then I've thought about that at times and thought to myself, yeah, he kind of has a point, but we need to keep complaining about it, or we're not going to keep improving things. What do you think? I mean, sort of, we're unhappy. We're always unhappy. Wait a minute. This isn't good enough. That's not good enough. But is that human nature also? And we need to really embrace that because that's how we improve things.
Or maybe not complain so much. It's just always looking to, just like as a student, I'm always looking to better myself. Not necessarily in comparison to my classmates or my peers, but there's always something better out there.
But aren't you having to use the negative to identify what is better? So, I mean, you're saying to yourself, well, this isn't good enough. I have to do this. Or I shouldn't do this. I should do that. I mean,
not necessarily. I don't know, I guess I just always think that there's always a bet, you know, I'm always open to a better way of doing things, even though I might think that what I'm doing is the best. I'm always open to new ideas, you know? Yeah.
Well, I want to say that I feel like advertising keeps telling us that there's always something better, you know, so advertising really creates all these wants then, and if you don't have them, then you feel deprived, or so we're being bombarded with that, and that helps with our, you know, instead of let's say we were advertised on advertisement every time there was a TV ad, it talked about what are you grateful for today, and what do you have, you know, what wonderful thing has happened to you, or even what small thing, or what have you paid attention to today, and made us more aware of that. And instead, we're just bombarded with colorful things that we're supposed to buy or do, or adventures we're supposed to have.
Yeah. But at the same time, if we think about social justice, various equality issues, economic justice, if we always looked at what was great and good, and we weren't consistently unhappy and pushing it further forward, would we have the abundance we have today? I mean, that, you know, it's hard to kind of grapple with that, you know. I mean, ironically, it seems like in finding fault with what we currently have, we also, over time, create better circumstances.
I guess it depends on what your dissatisfaction, where it takes you. I mean, does it take you to strive to make things better, or does it make you, you know, send you down a depressive path where you're paralyzed?
Well, don't you think that it has, on the whole, for most people? I mean, certainly in individual cases, but I mean, on a whole, because people haven't, in general, been satisfied, we've continued to struggle for social justice issues, the environmental issues,
cures for cancer,
animal rights, you know. Yeah, exactly. We're not, you know, it's not good enough.
Right.
It could be better. We could do better.
Yes.
So some of that dissatisfaction, you know, kind of turns into abundance, you know. It's like,
yes.
okay. Any other comments or anything else? Okay, let's just go on and see if it brings up any more ideas and things. So then this gives me, you know, an opportunity to go to the negative side, right? What about technology disasters? I mean, technology is saving us in all these different ways. But what about technology disasters? And so I did spend some time kind of looking online to see if I could find any major chronicled technology disasters. And I do know that there are many situations that have created episodic, targeted, periodic disruptions and lower class impoverishment, in my opinion, in different ways that later were termed a great success and reviewed as amazing progress. But the disruption for the people that lived during that period, and some of the things that are still impacting us, like this idea with the automobile, you know, there's not just progress and abundance wrapped up in that. There's politics and, you know, specific efforts to direct things in certain directions, like with the automobile, for example. I mean, Henry Ford made serious efforts to make sure that public transportation couldn't compete in a variety of ways with individual automobiles. And that was cool in a way for a period of time because people had transportation that was very individualistic. They could go many places. They wouldn't normally have been able to go wherever they wanted on their terms. But it also decimated a lot of public transportation in the United States. And now we're still dealing with this massive issue based on petroleum use, right, with the cars and trying to shift from that and how to make that work. Same thing if you think about the cotton gin, shifting to that technology to process the cotton. You know, it showed up in the 12th and 14th centuries, but it never took off until the 1700s. And then when it did, it put so many people out of work that it was a sort of start of the movement to actually break up those cotton gins. People would rise up and destroy them because they knew it was taking their jobs. And then in a way, aren't we really in the same situation now? So we've got this technology shift, we're shifting to this quantum economy, but we have people, I mean, consider all the things that are still wrapped up in petroleum, drugs, plastics manufacture, many people's retirement accounts, literally massive transformations of, economics and things like that will occur if it were to just suddenly shift tomorrow to renewables. That would literally probably trash a lot of people's retirement accounts, and we'd have another huge issue, with people not having support who are retired. What do you think about that?
Diversify your stock portfolio.
But can you see the current? I guess to me the clash between these two different economies and this disruptive technology was so apparent to me when prior to the inauguration, but in the interim period, Trump sat down and met with the tech leaders. It was like the old economy, which was wrapped up in Trump and his cabinet, calls in all these tech leaders, Elon Musk, all the people involved with the computers, the Singularity folks that are involved with AI, SpaceX, all these things, Tesla, calls them in and they're sitting there together. And I know because I was watching the Twitter feed and Elon Musk tweeted out the next day that, that it was just apples and oranges between Trump and Tim Cook. And I mean, how could that be more clear that he sees that huge divide between two major economies? And that's what we're living through. Because, the solar, the zero waste technology, the additive manufacturing, all these green technologies, they are going to be completely disruptive to the old economy. But it's what we want to do, right? I mean, or am I just imagining that? I don't know. What do you think?
I was saying this might be a good time to tell you.
Well, this is Mark. From my perspective, I think, this transition just on energy alone is critical, and I wish it would go faster. But it is very important, I think, to make this transition in this country and worldwide something that we all can work through. I mean, you're right. There would be a lot of personal income lost if there was an overnight transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. We're making the transition. It's going. I mean, I think later on in the book, there'll be more about that, but it's happening, and it's quite exciting, actually.
Yeah, I agree. The trend lines show us this. The trend lines are there. Someone else wants to say something? Margaret?
This might be a good time to tell about a fantastic talk that Cindy, who's in our book club, told me about. And it's just about the thing we're talking about the energy disruption. The talk is called Clean Disruption, Why Energy and Transportation Will Be Obsolete by 2030. You can Google it, and the talk happened in Oslo in March 2016. And he first talks about the main thing is about how solar is right at the tipping point where it's just going to take over, and by 2030 all cars will be electric cars run by renewable energy. So he talks first about how he has a slide of downtown New York City at the beginning of his talk, and they're all horses and buggies, one car. And then he has the next slide is downtown New York City, the same place, and they're all horses. I mean, all cars and only one horse and buggy.
Yeah.
And that transition happened in only 13 years. And then he talks about Kodak, had their film business for so long, and then they decided not to go with digital, and within 1 year, they were out of the business. And AT&T didn't want the cell phones, and just in 1 year they were out of the business. Right now that's happening with solar, and Tesla and all the car manufacturers are all working on all electric cars. And if you watch this film, this talk, Clean Disruption, I think you'll be convinced that we're really at the cutting edge of all this happening. Even Trump can't stop it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we're living through that up and down right now, really, with these two economies that are just against each other. I also read a little bit about how so many places around the country tried to prevent the automobile from being implemented by trying to pass laws and things like that that would shift or change that. And that's another interesting thing, you know, as you've been reading this book, he provides all this data, all this metadata for these long trend lines over time. And he points out that despite political and economic circumstances, these trend lines have continued in certain directions. You know, I don't know. I'm not entirely convinced yet that it's something that is inevitable, or that you know, we're always going to like, don't worry, you don't have to struggle for something because it's just going to happen. I'm not sure about that, because do you remember when he introduced the very beginning of the book when he talked about aluminum? Does anybody remember that example with the was the Emperor Tiberius, wasn't it? And there was they don't say the name of the goldsmith, just an unknown goldsmith, and he ended up beheaded because he came before Tiberius, who had all these massive hoards of silver and gold, with a aluminum plate that he had made from bauxite ore, which looks like soil. And he said, I made it from clay. And at that point in time, it was the rarest and most sought after, you know, metal. And so the Emperor Tiberius sees, this is going to destroy my economic empire. And he doesn't give the guy, you know, a reward, an award. He doesn't give him the Nobel Prize in the Roman Empire for figuring out how to refine bauxite ore. He cuts his head off and kills him. And then for 2 millennia, there was no aluminum, right? 2,000 years. Yeah, it's a long diversion there. And then my concern right now too is, and I don't know what people think about this, is maybe some of you think about it, maybe not, but I mean, are we at such a point with so many people on the planet and with such climate instability that if we don't make the right choices, we'll literally have another civilization crash? Yeah, it puts us sort of back to the base or square one or whatever, or maybe not even. What do you think? Is that, or do you think it's like, don't worry, be happy, the trends are with us? I don't know.
No, I think we have to really worry right now because of all the crises that we've talked about with poverty and everything. That can get fixed eventually. If we don't work on the climate change issue right now, we might cross the tipping point where all the scientists in the world are telling us that it will just have feedback loops, and the temperature of the earth will keep going no matter what we do. So we can't let that happen, and we're close to letting that happen. So there is a lot of worry right now, and so it is scary that Trump is having all these fossil fuel people in charge of everything.
Well, I think it's the two different economy mindsets. Mark, were you going to say something?
No. Well, has everyone, or anyone, I should say, seen Before the Flood?
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, Leonardo. Yeah, it was a fantastic National Geographic documentary. I just was really impressed. I think that is one of the things that could throw a big wrench in all the abundance that we can create, is the environmental change affecting us, and it is right now. Yeah,
it is worrisome because it's clear, you know, in the fossil record that climate change has led to mass extinction in the past, and that is a huge concern. Because even though the environment and the biogeochemical cycle tends to right itself, even when it does right itself, it doesn't mean that it's any kind of situation that's useful to us given our technology, population pressure numbers, things like that. So very, very concerning. Anybody else have something they want to add at this point?
Yeah, this is Eric.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, I think, well, what I think is ideology aside, the fact of the matter is, I think most people choose based on cost. So when you weigh the cost benefit, if it's going to cost too much, then you wouldn't go solar. And if the cost is able to be driven down, then people will start using the alternative energy. So that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah, the good news there too is that we have got to the point where we're moving past that cost barrier in many ways for solar and wind, for sure. And, you know, Iowa is what, 31% solar, or 33, Mark? I mean, we're not solar, indirect solar wind. Sorry, 31 or 33%.
Well, yeah, and the goal, it's higher than that actually, Dr. Zeman. The goal in Iowa by 2020 is to be 85% renewable energy, if we can just broaden it. And
Yeah.
I think right now we're on target, so I would say we're probably in the neighborhood of about 60%.
As renewable overall, but wind is what, like a third at least, right?
The vast majority of that in Iowa.
Yeah, so I had seen an article that was around 31 to 32. Eric?
Yeah, just a side note. I don't know how many of you guys, subscribe or bought into that CFU solar energy thing. Yeah, and I realized, I'm one of those as well. And I realized that during the winter months, it didn't give me much of a credit because I think there wasn't much of sun.
Yeah, no, you've got to you got to take the long haul view on that, like, and amortize it over an entire year, right? So it helps me out a lot in the spring and summer and fall, but maybe not so much in the winter, of course. But literally, again, that's another great example of being able to invest that way in the community, think about that and drive costs down. And then for some of us, we can afford to invest that way, and we're doing so on ideological grounds. Understandably, some people cannot afford that. But I think part of what, Diamandis is targeting here is social entrepreneurs. He has that in the first sections of these chapters. He talks about the social entrepreneurs and the do-it-yourselfers, in the sense DIY, who would like to see things made more cheaply and broadly available and widely distributed, particularly in developing nations, so that they can step over or shortcut, that industrial petroleum era we've been kind of struggling and seesawing back and forth with, and move forward into more of a idea of this quantum economy idea. And which leads me to the next part here, is the quantum economy. And this is something that Mark and I have talked about, and we presented it when we did the What If We Could Imagine Abundance presentation. And we kind of see this as like the new economy that's coming on. Some people call it the solar economy, but more direct utilization of the sun's energy, direct utilization of photons for energy production, biomimicry, using a systems analysis approach to see outside the box and the box outside the box, and then to work on a solution that really shifts the entire system. It doesn't, keep us just working on one aspect of it and not making progress. The idea that self-sufficiency equals poverty, and that the distributed brain in the computing sense gives us, and that the distribution of labor gives us efficiencies we would never have if we were trying to do everything on our own. This doesn't say anything about the idea of community, but it is the idea that, just in isolation, and maybe this is something that we're missing, we need to bring more community in the psychosocial sense into this too. That we're not going to accomplish this without, broadly distributed knowledge, breaking down barriers in a variety of ways. But then we also see the advanced automation, dematerialization, so making things smaller, lighter. I mean, remember the very first bag phones, and now we have these, which is literally a TV, a radio. I mean, there's so many things this one device is, that you would pile up 100 pounds of technological equipment in the 70s. I mean, you couldn't even afford some of the things in the 70s that this cell phone can do. So, and then nanotechnology, nanoteration, which is going to lead us to the faster and faster computing, which is really quantum computing. So just some very interesting things with this new economy that's clashing up against this previous model. And we're definitely in the middle of that right now. And then I had a few videos in here that are kind of cool. I want to kind of go then into showing some of these and have us think about how these reflect those principles of the quantum economy. But I might just show a little bit of it and stop it, just because I wanted to show you some neat stuff about some of them. Do people have some thoughts and ideas about that idea of a quantum economy? What do you think about that before we get into just some examples of that? And that would be sort of like the second big chunk of the book here, which is these exponential technologies as signs of a quantum economy. And for our financial and economics folks, in other words, Dr. Lee, this isn't to be confused with Bernard Schmitt's The Quantum Economics Model. Because there is an individual out there that has a model like that. He's an economist. And it's more like thinking of like quantum physics, like using solar versus very old kind of concentrated buried solar that we then dig up and burn as fossil fuel.
Let's go to your video.
Any other ideas? Or I'm curious if Marge, who was involved in the audience that had a lot of to do with the wind and the solar power, do you see these aspects in solar? Because you mentioned there's so many things that solar would accomplish if we adequately implemented it. Are they still out there?
Yeah. Well, it's true. I think
Okay.
solar is going to change all our lives in a very big hurry. And I know Eric talked about costs of renewable energy, but one thing we have to consider is we are still subsidizing fossil fuels in so many ways, more so than renewable energies. And if we stop subsidizing in the tax laws and many other ways, they also don't have to obey the Clean Water Act and, you know, when they're doing their fracking and stuff. So other industries have to obey all these environmental regulations, and it would cost them more to, you know, for their business to get the latest technology. But the fossil fuel industry has been exempt from these regulations for many, many years and getting, you know, a lot of subsidies. So a lot of people think that if nobody got a subsidy, if renewable energy didn't get any subsidies, no subsidies for solar, wind, or geothermal, but also no subsidies for fossil fuel, wind and solar would take off like crazy because it's cheaper. And that's not even counting all the health costs to our country from the fossil fuels. So renewable energy is much cheaper when you consider total costs.
Yeah, I have some, I see what you're saying there, and I have some concerns that really, you know, the way things are moving with the new administration and what they're attempting to do is to really imbalance that equation again, right? So by saying, well, environmental regulations have, you know, made it too easy. I mean, if you're going to roll back all the environmental regulations that protect air and water quality, you're not going to have clean air and water. So I don't know how you're going to have clean air and water and roll back, you know, regulations and make it easier to extract oil or coal, etc. I mean, those two things just don't go together. And if you're saying we're not great because we're moving on, then you're trying to reverse things to a time when you think it was great, because that really is the model where things were great for you, you know, but is it great for the majority of individuals? And I think that that's a good point and a very serious issue. And it's just another sign of the clash of these two different kinds of economies, fundamental economies. But I think it's very clear from Diamandis's book and his writing that he sees the ability to provide abundance globally, as defined earlier in our discussions, predicated upon this quantum era and really having the energy and resources available through decentralized at times, and at times distributed means. Okay. So if we go ahead and then look at energy, which we've just kind of started talking about, I just wanted to show you this quick snippet of this video because it's just cool, and I love these wind turbines here. They look like trees, so they're just neat. Go look at this. Hopefully it'll run.
Next time you're sitting in a city park, you might find yourself surrounded by some unusual trees. The wind tree is made up of a steel trunk and mini turbine plastic leaves, and it's designed to harness energy from even the slightest of breezes. French startup New Wind says its silent but powerful windmill should appeal to those opposed to the noise and size of more traditional wind turbines. And founder Jérôme Michaud-de-la-Rivière says it works even when there's hardly any wind at all.
The main advantage of our technology is that it works with a very small input of energy and
I lost volume.
Elysee next March.
There we go.
Trees are expected to cost around $37,000 each, but New Wind says they should pay for themselves within 2 years. The company hopes to start mass production by early 2016.
Okay, well that's just a very neat kind of wind turbine. And I don't know, were people aware of that? Has anyone ever seen anything like that in Iowa? It's pretty neat. I'm
Dr.
wondering.
Zeman, I have not seen anything like that. That was totally new to me.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I would love to have one of those in my yard running in the winter. I mean, it wouldn't be unattractive either. And if it's relatively silent, how could everybody be irritated by that, right? It would be a neat little thing to just have running up in your yard in the winter when the sun's not out.
I just had to cut down a tree because of birch boar, so that would look great.
Yeah, he did say that it was like 37,000 pounds right now, but not literally weight, but English pounds. So, but the price hopefully will go down, right?
Not enough abundance in my household for that.
Yeah, really. Exactly, I agree. Anybody else have some comments or anything?
One thing I wanted to say is that perhaps, even Donald Trump has a competitive spirit. And think of when somebody, when Russia went and Sputnik, and then we suddenly, had to get to the moon. And so it could be, if we start, going at, as the United States starts becoming this, little individualistic nation, that doesn't mean that the rest of the world's not going to continue. And perhaps, as soon as we see that we're not doing well, that may jumpstart and, may possibly work.
Yeah, let's hope so. I think that we've already spent a lot of time kind of falling behind the UK and Germany for sure, and the Netherlands, and in some of these areas. But yeah, maybe.
Wait till China and Russia, get ahead of us in some dramatic way.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, roll on. We're going to have a lot more discussion about that. And again, Iowa leads in wind energy production for sure across the United States. I'm just absolutely floored by that figure of how much energy is going to come from a comprehensive palette of renewables. By what year, Mark, was it?
Well, Dr. Zeman, I did check. I went back and checked those stats. And right now, Iowa is 47% of our energy comes from wind.
Wow, 47%.
Yep. In 2017, Governor Branstad had okayed a $500 million project with Mid-America, which will move that number higher. And by 2020, the goal is to be 85%.
Wow. Actually, 2020.
That kind of momentum you can't stop.
No, that's great. I don't know if anyone else in the book club saw this, but just the other day, about a week ago on KWWL, they did a special about how much the air quality in Iowa has improved because of wind energy generation and the lack of coal-fired power plants. So I thought that was very nice too. Very interesting. Great. Okay. In the health area, this is an area where there's so much innovation and things going on, and certainly a lot more work to do. But one of the things I kind of want to focus on, I could focus on so much, immunotherapy, or some of these ideas of creating small sample, multi-sample, almost like the health tricorder, the Star Trek tricorder, where the doctor could determine everything that, there's Verge and SpaceX prizes out there for that. There's a lot of work going on in that area. They're moving it forward. But one of the other really interesting things is the stuff that's happening with, mapping the human genome, understanding it, associating genetic sequences with probability of disease outcomes, and the potential that has for truly preventive medicine. And 23andMe is really pushing that with their DNA analysis and health data analysis, because they feel they have enough information now. And of course, this is all predicated on understanding those gene sequences and feeding masses of biomolecular data into large computer databases, and then having the computing power to understand, what we're feeding in and relating that to one another, and then becoming aware of the biomolecular pathways and things that control upregulation of genes, downregulations of genes, and the expressions of proteins and enzymes, which predicate so many of our health issues and concerns. And now with the 23andMe genetic analysis, you can find out what kind of drug reactions you're likely to have before you take the drugs, which is a big help. Vitamin and mineral needs that are going to be things that are really consistent through the entire life cycle, hormonal imbalances that you may be, both men and women may be subjected to because of their genetic makeup, that they're more likely to experience these, brain and nervous system imbalances, and inflammation and autoimmune propensity. And that's some very important information to have, because there's so many lifestyle, stress management, dietary things that can be done to kind of prevent disease and enhance wellness through the entire life cycle if we know this. Now, what do people think about that? Because I think that there's also potential pitfalls in having this information. But this is another way that computing power, miniaturization, naniturization, and more advanced understanding of biomolecular pathways and being able to crunch that data in supercomputing formats is moving us forward. Any comments or concerns?
I think it's all fantastic to have more information in medicine. The only thing is we don't want the insurance companies to kick us off because we might have some genetics that cost them money down the road.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking about myself. So yeah, it's important information to have, but what about if your employer has it, or your potential employer? And again, there is another thing we have to keep in mind right now, and this may change in the future as that data analysis gets better. A lot of times now when we get the genetic sequence, it's a probability function. And that probability is usually less than 100%. Not always the case, but in many circumstances, it's less than 100%. So you're dealing with probabilities again and not certainties. And people might get that data, though, and think certain things are certainties. But yeah, okay, but good, potentially good things, and things we have to also keep an eye on, and that with massive social justice implications. And then a variety of food and water issues. I love this one. So I'm going to go ahead and show this one instead of the water. This is about water filters that are being made cheaper and smaller and easy to use, very inexpensive, to create a good, potable water situation for people around the world. I think that is so important to understand. One of the very important messages in this book is when children survive in childhood, when women are educated, and when people have access to birth control, population pressures fall, populations shrink. When people can assure that their children will survive, they will have, 30%, there's a 30% fewer children born to those families. And, if we're talking about population pressure concerns, that is just an incredibly important point to be made, and one that I think, we often miss. But I kind of like this video because it's a sign of hydroponic gardening that's going on right now in the United States. And it's a nice little clip here.
With temperatures in the 40s, it feels like fall is gone before it started. It's left green country looking a little bit browner and may have you wondering, where do I find fresh local produce? Well, we found some farmers who've taken the operation inside.
We got 1,368 towers. Most of them are 44 ring stall or 11 ring stall and have 44 slots. Some of them are 13 and have 52. Altogether, we've got a little over 62,000 individual slots for individual plants at any given time.
Row after row, filled from top to bottom, seedling or harvest ready. This greenhouse knows no season.
This is a Lola Rota. This is a lemon sorrel.
The growing season never stops for Rob Valenta at Scissortail Farms.
Provide produce for the local community. Typically it comes from California or Arizona that is trucked in. So we're able to provide for the local community without having to go through those channels.
To make it all happen, a boiler system for heat, lighting to extend the days, water that's conditioned, none of it lost except to evaporation. It's a practice allowing us to reimagine the local farm, and it begins here.
They spend 1 to 2 weeks in here for the root systems to develop before they go into the tower.
Once in the tower, the plants blossom and the roots take off.
We transfer them into the towers and the roots continue to grow as nutrients rain down over them.
Once picked, they wind up in a handful of restaurants and local grocery stores across green country before making their final stop with you. Max Resnick, 2 News works for you.
Okay, so a really interesting way in which local produce could be produced. Certainly there's no reason the greenhouse couldn't be ran on solar or wind power. And that type of farming, you don't have to use the chemicals. It's an isolated environment, so you don't have the insect predation. And that type of farming uses 70% less water than in the field agriculture. And then if you take it from hydroponics to aeroponics, there's another 70% decrease for the water conservation. I have had some interesting conversations with people about, well, what about micronutrients in that situation? So I don't know, what do people think? And we're coming down to the close here, so I know we're going to have to wrap up things pretty soon here. So,
Dr. Zeman, was the question about micronutrients?
Yeah, what do people think? Or, I mean, does that seem like, yeah, go greens, or are you worried? Well, it didn't come from the soil, so. I mean, it's, nutrients and water are raining down through the roots, and there's a minimal soil structure there.
What research has been done on the final product grown?
I haven't seen a lot yet, but I did have someone bring up the micronutrient issue to me. Now, there's no reason you couldn't make sure there's not microminerals and things like that in the solutions. Although that might then, I don't know if that's going to pose an issue for the circulating pumps or whatever, but then it would be another thing they would overcome. But as far as I know, I'm not sure, that there's any difference. I don't know. I don't think it's been really around long enough. I know I have seen Bibb lettuce that has definitely been grown this way. That's why you can buy the Bibb lettuce and you see that root structure underneath it and there's no soil around it really. And I've had that Bibb lettuce and it was tasty. I don't know. What about anybody else? Any other? It has amazing ability to save water. No soil erosion, no pesticide use.
As far as the micronutrients go, I know they can be put into the solution, and that, I believe, is how it is done. The research that I did that will be used in our session at the end of February. Some of it has to do with food abundance, and they talk about hydroponic farming, and even to the point where there's fish farms, and the end product from the use of the fish farms can be used in hydroponics.
Exactly. That's one of the conversations I had with one of the individuals. Well, maybe you could take some of the waste from the fish farming and get that into the hydroponic situation for micronutrients. Now, I know they do use NPK, but I don't think they add like trace elements and things. And I think that was the discussion the person was having with me, magnesium, stuff like that.
I know that's all important.
Eric, did you have something you wanted to say? Your microphone is muted if you did. We can't hear you.
I was about to say I need to make a move.
Oh, okay, you have to go. Yeah, we're getting down to the wire here and need to wrap up. So that was really the end. I had one last little video on manufacturing, which showed additive manufacturing, which is a 3D printer that prints metal parts. It's kind of cool to watch it run. I can run it for just a minute and let people see that. This is the last slide, really. We're down to the wire here, so.
Direct metal laser sintering, also known as DMLS, is an additive manufacturing technology that creates metal parts directly from 3D CAD data without the need for tooling. DMLS utilizes a variety of metal and alloy materials, such as stainless steel, cobalt chrome, and Inconel, to create strong, durable parts and prototypes. DMLS is an excellent choice for functional metal prototypes, high-temperature applications, and end-use parts. The DMLS process begins in the same fashion as other layer additive manufacturing technologies. A program takes 3D CAD data and mathematically slices it into 2D cross-sections. Each of these sections will act as a blueprint, telling the DMLS machine exactly where to sinter the metal material. The data is then transferred to the DMLS equipment. A recoater assembly pushes powdered metal material from the powder supply to create a uniform layer over the base plate. A laser then draws a 2D cross-section on the surface of the build material, heating and fusing the material.
Okay, well, out of the respect for our time, I'm going to stop it there, but you can see that then the layers are built up one on another. If anybody is familiar with metal casting, that eliminates all the sands and the molds, and there's just a ton of waste that's then eliminated. So that gets us to that question about if we can completely recycle that and we can 3D print it, we're getting towards zero waste, and our footprint is becoming smaller and smaller. So this was just a final little video about the improvements in health and well-being around the world over the last 100 years, and how many countries have moved out of poverty, and it's a lot, and we'll hear about that, I think, again and again as we move on through these chapters. Is there anything that someone would like to add as we come down here to wind up?
I just have a quick question, Catherine. Is this going to be available to us if we wanted to go and watch those video clips? Could we download it and view it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It will be. I think it takes about a week or two to get the clip uploaded, but it'll be uploaded into the RTTC website where the book club sections are. Anybody else have anything to say? This is an interesting book. It brings up a lot of interesting conversations and discussions. It's both hopeful and it kind of does make you feel nervous too. It's like, oh, there's this hope that we could have this abundant future, but there's also this problem that we could miss it, that we could end up sort of the unfortunate beheaded innovator of aluminum, production. And so, these kinds of things. But I look forward to being in on the other 2 major sessions with the book. And unless I have any other questions or comments, I'm going to ask Janu to go ahead and take the show back and shut us down. And
Catherine, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. All right. Have a great evening, everybody. See you on the 9th.